Welcome to episode 5 of Every Naval Battle in History. In this one we're going to discuss an unnamed battle between Phoenician forces fighting for Persia and the Ionian Greeks. This is a rivalry that is spoken of as if it was age-old, but didn't really occur, at least in any documented way, until 497 BCE. Not a whole lot is known about this one, but it sets the stage for a great many battles to come, so let's crack into it and figure out who the players are. Let's talk about the Persians. More correctly called the Achaemenid Empire, more commonly referred to as the Persians, and at the time simply the Empire. You know you've made it as an empire when there's no question which one you are. A bit like the Royal Navy never getting confused for the Dutch one. Stretching from the Balkans in Europe to the Indus Valley, the empire's population is estimated to have been between 17 and 35 million souls. Multicultural, well-governed, something of a golden age for the region. The founder of the empire, Cyrus the Great, was considered to be anointed by God in the Bible. Yes, that Bible. From the book of Isaiah. Thus says the Lord to his anointed, to Cyrus, whom he has taken by his right hand to subdue the nations before him, and strip the loins of kings, to force the gateways between him that their gates be closed no more. I will go before you levelling the heights. I will shatter the bronze gateways, smash the iron bars. I will give you the hidden treasures, the secret hoards, that you may know that I am the Lord. Let's remember that the ancient Jews generally hated everyone, but they literally wrote the Persian emperor up as the Messiah. The empire was brilliant at including differing peoples and faiths peacefully. When we talk about the Phoenicians in this battle, we almost certainly mean forces from the old Phoenician cities of Tyre and Sidon in today's Lebanon. And then the Persians had the misfortune to encounter the Greeks. But what about the Ionians? This Greek tribe gave their name to the Ionian Sea to the west of Greece, although Ionia itself is on the Turkish coast. In fact, almost all of the Ionians we're going to talk about in this episode are in fact in the Aegean Sea, which is not going to be the most confusing thing that's going to happen in this story. Philosophers, mathematicians, pioneering navigators, they were driving forces in Greek expansion. The problem was that most of the Ionian League was on the Anatolian mainland, what today we would call Turkey. The Lydians had conquered the Ionians around 560 BCE. In turn, the rise of the Persians had seen them swallow up the Lydians, which left the Persians, who had bigger things on their mind, in possession of a bunch of Greek cities they'd never given much thought to. The usual Persian tactics, and good tactics for any empire, of picking and backing a particular group to run their holdings for them, didn't work with the feuding Greeks. The Persians set up local rulers, they called them tyrants, and hoped they could get on with running the rest of their huge empire. Remember, at the time, the term tyrant didn't have the modern connotations and was reasonably common in the Greek world, just referring to someone who was in charge. In the imperial context, you could think of these tyrants simply as administrators, with a capital A. And then enters one of the great assholes of history, a man you've never heard of who changed just about every single thing in our world. Aristo, the tyrant of Melitus. Aristo father-in-law, who he had inherited the position of tyrant from, was an epic asshole too, but not involved in any naval battles. In 499, Aristo took a crack at capturing the Greek island of Naxos for the Persians. The whole thing was his scheme. After a failed 4-month siege, he returned home owing a huge amount of money to the Persians who had backed his failed scheme. Now he had a problem. How was he going to get under this pile of debt and the impending wrath of the imperial court? His solution was to convince the Ionians to revolt against the Persians who he owed money to, just months after trying to conquer Naxos for the Persian Empire. From this bastard grifter comes the Persian-Greek Wars, the Hellenic period, the rise of Rome, and the world as we know it. Turning to the battle, Athens had its own sordid history of flirting with the Persians, but at this moment in time, it was on the imperial naughty list. So Athens backed the Ionian revolt. A Greek force with a lot of Athenian troops then burned down the city of Sardis, in modern-day Turkey, which seriously upset Emperor Darius and most other Persians, and particularly the people of Sardis. According to the legend, Darius had forgotten who the Athenians were, and he is said, admittedly he is said by Greeks, to then task a servant with reminding him 3 times a day who these murderous lunatics were. Soon after torching Sardis, the Greeks were caught by a Persian army, who gave them such a thrashing the Athenians decided they wanted no more to do with Aristogoras' schemes. Too late, the empire was now in motion. The island of Cyprus, on the other hand, was just rising up to join the revolt. The Phoenicians had been functioning reasonably happily inside the empire. They transported the Persian army to Cyprus, and an Ionian fleet came south to meet them. What sort of ships? Probably triremes, lots of oars and rams and soldiers, and historians of later years just call them all triremes. The numbers are vague, and the only source on this, Herodotus writing decades later, says the Greeks had a really great victory at sea. On land, in Cyprus, the Persian army crushed the revolting Cypriots, and the Ionians decided this was a good time to sail home. As winners, of course. Some might say that having successfully transported the Persian army, the Phoenicians had already achieved their strategic goals. But folks of that view didn't write the Greek histories. Was it really all Aristogoras' fault? Many argue that the historical forces, demographic, economic, climactic, which led to the Ionian revolt, and in turn the making of our world, and in particular the Greek and Persian conflict, were beyond the individual personalities. On the other hand, the Persians were really good at managing disparate groups, and while there are more naval battles to come in this story, we can skip ahead and note that post-revolt they made some very sensible reforms. They created a system of arbitration amongst the Ionian states to prevent conflict. They abolished the tyrants and replaced them with Athenian-style democracies. Think about that for a moment. The Persians abolished the Greek tyrannies and installed democratic government. The Persians reformed the tax system. In 491, when Darius asked the Greek city-states to submit and be governed the same way the Ionians were, they all signed up, except Athens and Sparta. My point is that if not for the Athenians burning down a Persian city for no good reason, other than Aristogoras egging them on into the conflict to escape his self-inflicted debts, there could well have been peace between the Greeks and the Persians. It was not to be. Instead we got this world. More battles to come. We've got a lot of ground to cover as we take on every naval battle in history.